for teenagers, because you guys really are growing. And I say this is like it's when you guys sleep like 12 hours, you're like, my body's growing. That's what you just need. That's the line you need to learn and tell your parents. My body's growing. I need the rest. Right? Now, if you're staying up till 2 o'clock on your phone, that's a different conversation, or playing games. Mm-hmm. What are you playing? Steam. Steam. Is it a platform? Okay. That's the one thing I thought I'd be like a horrible youth pastor at this point in my life, because I know nothing about gaming. I tried to learn like PlayStation and all that back in the day. I don't have the skill set to do that. I can't make. And so last night, one of our youth workers was doing the games, and it ended up as a tie. And the tiebreaker was whoever had the best imitation of some um, Fortnite character. And I'm like, sure, whatever, because I know of it, but I know nothing more about it. So I'm okay. I'm okay not knowing all that. All right. Um, Homework review. This is what we're gonna do today. Homework review. Talk about critical thinking again. Talking about assignments and introduce student presentations. All right. I don't know why this is. Yeah, all of a sudden I have 8 people drop out of my class. All right. Again, I keep punting the book down the road, but we're not going to deal with the book today because half the class isn't here. But I'm just going to encourage you to just keep reading, just keep moving ahead. Yeah. And the good thing is, it's literally, yeah, it's 10 chapters. So I mean, we'll be done with the book before the class. So well, we will discuss a little bit, but again, I think it's just a helpful supplement to what we're talking about every week. Okay. Ground news article. So let's talk about the Hamas Israel peace deal. Did you guys look at the ground news website and see how they were assessing it and handling it? What's your thoughts? Not everybody at once. I'm gonna call her Lily because she has no idea what I'm talking about. Huh? So the idea was we were going to use the ground news website to look at the way the Israel-Gaza peace deal was being covered. And so, I wanted to show you an example. So it was Monday. Was it Monday? Monday of last week, Monday or Tuesday, and the hostages were returned. The 20 living hostages. There's 28 that they know of that are dead, and they haven't returned them yet. And then they're like, we may not be able to return them. Why? And then you begin to learn that basically Hamas is this loosely network of multiple terrorist groups. And so the Hamas leadership is like, we may not be able to get that information from this segment. So it's not like a clear, clean structure. That again is an indication for me. Again, my bias is I'm pro-Israel. Is when people say, well, Geneva Convention and blah, blah, blah. Well, they're not a recognized country, A. And B, a whole lot of the whole Geneva Convention war laws came about after World War II and are applicable to nations and organized army and protected, representations of that nation. Hamas has been designated as a terrorist group, and one of the reasons for that is it's not officially recognized by the nation of, although the people of Gaza did vote in Hamas. but they're not a separate nation. And so, but the bottom line is it's basically a hodgepodge of all these different militant groups, terrorist groups, loosely under the authority of this. And that's one of the concerns about the peace deal is, will the leadership of Hamas, A, agree, and B, be able to bring everybody else in line? And this is one of the things that you talk about bias is, and I didn't look it up, but I've only seen like two articles, referencing this. So I think they returned the hostages on Tuesday, was the hostage exchange. That's not right. The hostage prisoners exchange, because there were 20 Israeli hostages. Did anybody know how many the Hamas prisoners were returned? Almost 2,000, 1,900 plus. And they were either caught on October 7th when they were attacking Israel, or have since been caught in military conflict with Israel. So they were legit prisoners who had attacked Israel, not innocent civilians who were taken hostage. And that wasn't the first prisoners that Hamas has gotten out of this deal. And so while Israel got all their, quote unquote, all their hostages back, they gave back probably close to 5,000 Hamas militants who had attacked Israel. So in a just world, those prisoners would stay in prison and deal with the consequences of their crime of attacking Israel. But they gave them up. So that all happened on Tuesday. On Monday, let's see if you guys heard anything about this. So the ceasefire happened on Sunday. Israel pulled back to a perimeter outside of Gaza, what they called a safety zone, but they were no longer in Gaza and engaged in active warfare. So that happened on Sunday. On Monday, so Sunday was the withdrawal. Monday was like a neutral day. And then Tuesday, the hostage prisoner swap was going to happen. On Monday, Hamas leadership group attacked and killed over 50 other Gazans who were they call them gangs, who were fighting and feuding with the Hamas leadership. So here's the whole point of me saying that. Part of the bias of the pro-Hamas media and college students and everybody else has been Israel's inflicting this horrible war on the Gazan people and killing innocents. And here are all these dead bodies to prove this. And when Israel would come back and say, yes, we've been responsible for some innocent loss of lives, that's not our goal. We try not to let that happen. They've been sending in food and everything else to try and prepare that. They would let them know, hey, we're going to come in and we're going to do an offensive. So if you're here and you're an innocent, please leave. And anytime that Israel would say, but Hamas is killing some of their own people, those who are pro-Israel or pro-Hamas were going, they would never do that. Guess what? They do it. And this is, but my point is, it's not been covered. So you talk about bias. I've not even seen the right-wing conservative side of the aisle discuss this much. And I'm thinking, to me, in my analysis of this, that's proof of what has been said all along from the pro-Israel side defending their use of force, because it wasn't just them, that Hamas was in fact attacking and killing its own people. Now, I've since heard it. I think one or two of the follow-up reports I heard about it was basically they're saying that this was one of these kind of loosely affiliated militia groups within the Hamas structure, but they were fighting against the Hamas leadership. And so the Hamas leadership went in and attacked them to supposedly get them in line with the peace agreement. For me, the reason doesn't matter as much as the fact that, yes, Hamas people, the Gazans were killing their own people. Hamas leadership were killing Gazans. It wasn't just the Israeli fight. So anyway, but I wanted to share with you an example of blatant bias from the anti-Israel side is how I'd put it. So there's a CNN contributor. What is her name again? She's known for being biased. She's, if you will, left-leaning / liberal. And Christina Amanpour, this is the day the hostages are being released, freed, and this is what she had to say. Do you hear what she said? The Israeli hostages who've been held against their will for 2 years were probably treated better than the average Gazan because of the way the Israelites, the implication is because of the way Israel has fought this war. See, that's the kind of bias. If you're not paying attention, you caught it right away, didn't you? If you're not paying attention, but everybody pushed back on her big time, and she actually came back out and apologized, which is so funny to see people these days apologize. I think this is her apology. So that was her apology, and that's rare, but it's more and more now because there's been this shift away from allowing quote unquote news people and even media people to say insensitive things that are just rude, you know. So I wanted to share that as an example of bias, and that's the kind of stuff that I hope that after this class, you guys will at least pause and think about what's been said, what you've read, what you've seen, what you've heard, so that you can process it through a filter of, does that make sense? Is that right? Is that wrong? Because at the end of the day, remember, we looked at this graphic, and I know I keep repeating it, and I'm actually going to give you a printout of this today as part of your prep for your presentation. But I hope that you guys, every time you hear of something, that you will intentionally think about what's real, what's factual, what happened, and then how should I respond to what's happened? How do I gather information so I can be equipped and prepared to adequately respond to that? Now, let me give you context, because not everybody is going to be as interested in current events like I am. It's something that I've always, since high school, I think I told you guys I took a current events class, and I've always been engaged and interested in current events. And there were times in my life, like when my dad, when I was working for my dad when I was in college and grad school, he would have conservative talk radio on all the time. And so in that season of my life, I was probably more politically engaged than I am now, only because it was on 4 hours a day, every day in my dad's shop. Now I want to be informed, I want to be aware, but I'm not interested in having debates because I just don't want the hassle. And as a pastor, that's not my priority. My priority is to help people know Christ, and so me being aware helps me to know how to pray. And then, like for my wife and my oldest daughter, who's the science teacher in history, my son, she's a science teacher in Texas. They are not engaged in anything that's happening in the world. They don't care about the headlines. They're not interested in current events. And so when things come up, they will ask, well, what is it about? Blah, blah, blah. And I'll try to give them a 3-minute, overview. And here's why I think what I think and why. Um, Thankfully, my daughter married a man like her dad, and he's like me, a bit more engaged. So he's going to kind of pick up. My wife and daughter are not unintelligent people. They're very intelligent, highly intelligent people, both of them, but they just don't want to be bothered by it. And that's okay if that's who you end up being. But whether you're just, you spend your life as a single adult, or you get married, you have children, you have a family, you're part of your church, you go to work, you're part of your work environment, I want you to be equipped to know how to process information. And I say this, we're using a lot of news events, but you can use this whole concept, this critical thinking about movies that you watch, music that you're listening to. It all applies, because again, I love movies. I'm a huge fan of movies. And I will allow for, we talked about before, like some things like bad language and violence, because I like action movies, right? But I don't have a lot of tolerance for sexual activity and things like that being portrayed on screen. But at the same time, if a movie or show is overly political, I don't want to entertain it. And especially if it's taking pot shots at Christianity or conservative people like myself, I just don't even want to bother with it. And so, like, there was a show on in I think it was the 90s, early 2000s, The West Wing. It won all kinds of Emmys and stuff of being I don't want to watch it, because it was about a liberal president in the White House and the inner workings of politics. And I'm like, I have no interest in seeing the conservatives being bashed on a weekly basis. I don't care how good the writing is, Same thing with anti-Christianity. There was a comedy show that came out, and I never watched it, but it was called The Good Place. And it was the whole idea about heaven, but yet it was portrayed as like just whacked and messed up as our world is. I'm like, well, I have no interest in seeing that, And so hopefully you'll come out of this, not just thinking about news and events, but also using that same kind of filter to think through everything that you're being exposed to. Okay. For example, I mean, how do you determine, is this a good song or not? Well, of course, I like the beat, I like the style, I like the artist, I like all this. Okay, but what about what the artist is saying? And this is really interesting because I've not listened to any of it, but what the feedback from Taylor Swift's newest album is, it's like all the fangirls are just gaga goo over it. But there's one song on there where it's all about her and her relationship with Kelsey, is it? I can't remember. Travis, yeah. And about how she wants to have children. And so she's had a whole wing of her fan base that are left leaning up in arms, because to them, they're wanting, that's the derogatory term is traditional. They're interpreting her desire to get married and have children and all that as her pushing traditional morals and values, as if she's attacking them. Well, when you look at even other songs on that same album, it's almost like they kind of have a point. I mean, a lot of what she's on, female empowerment, and guys are jerks, and and from what I understand, there's a whole lot of cussing on this one. Again, when you look at her roots, she was a 13-year-old singer in Nashville, Christian. A lot of her early stuff had a lot of Christian influence. That's way in her rearview mirror now, And so it's just interesting. So, like, I'll be listening to something with my daughter. Now, it's harder for me because she's into K-pop and C-pop, and when it's Korean and Chinese, I have no idea what they're saying. But if she has the video on and I see the video, I'm like, maybe we should pick something else, But if there's English words, we'll stop. I don't do this with every song. I don't lecture with every song. I don't beat her up with the Bible every time something. That's not what I do. I know I'm a pastor, but I look for opportunities to speak truth into her life in ways that she will receive. And so again, if nothing else, this will help you guys process those kinds of things too. Because one of the things you have to do as a teenager, if you're being raised in a Christian home, is you have to come to terms of you've been given the gift of faith that your parents have, and they want you to have the same faith, but you have to decide if you're going to own it or not, own it for yourself or not. You can't get into heaven based on your parents' faith. It's what are you going to do with Jesus? It's to you who is Jesus, not what Jesus is to your grandma or to your mom or to your dad or your sister or your best friend. It's to what is Jesus to you. And you have to make that decision. And so what that looks like for you living out that then is important as you transition from childhood to adulthood, which is what teen years is all about. And so again, I hope that all this will help you in doing that. So all that to say, one of the assignments for last week was to look at that event. Okay, that's okay. All right, and then the 3x3x3 worksheet. I'm not going to have you turn those in, but anything I've talked all this time about the Hamas Israel debate. I'm going to eat a cookie. Tell me what else you guys heard about in the last week.
Like the young Republican squad or whatever. Like, I don't even remember what it was about. Ash or something.
About the young Republicans, or they were talking trash about somebody else?
Well, it was on NSNBC.
No.
So I think it made it sound like it actually is. Like, I didn't read the whole article.
Okay. It's funny you say that because that's kind of where I'm in my world today, as I'll read the headline, and I admit I'll take away an impression. It may be completely wrong because I don't read the article. But just like you just did there is, if I read something, I'm like, that's intriguing. I want to know more. I'll read the article or I'll watch the video or whatever. But a lot of times like that, it'd be like, like we'll talk about in our critical thinking process. I know the source. I know they're going to bash. So I'm not going to give it the time of day. I don't care, Now that's not true. I do listen. I do try to look at other things, but it tends to make me more angry than to be open to it. It's one of the things I'm working on is trying to gather. That's one of the things we're talking about and making, as you assess and make determinations. Have you looked at other points of view? Do they have anything valid to say? Like, for example, in the whole LGBTQ thing about the way, I'll use generic terms here, Christians have treated people in struggling with gender identity and sexual attraction. Unfortunately, historically, they're right. Initially, we didn't know how to respond. It freaked us out. And it was such a kind of, I think, an anti creation concept that we're just kind of like, ugh. And our response of yuck was to be mean and ugly. And so they're right. I agree with them on that. We have a history of not treating that population well. Does that then now equate to us fully embracing them and accepting and celebrating every decision they make? No. But what it does force us to do to say, you're right. We have not done this well. These are the steps I'm taking to do it differently. I believe we can disagree, but I can still be respectful, treat you with dignity and respect, and I do expect you to do the same in return. And they could say, well, you don't deserve it. I'm like, well, I've not done anything to you personally. I don't have a history of being ugly. So now you're making the same categorical mistake that you're accusing me and my group of making, treating me as a group, as a lump, as if I'm the same as all the ugly treatment you've received. And it's the same error, just with a different label. So anyway, so looking at other points of view isn't a bad idea, so long, and I think this is important for you guys, especially your time in life, especially that you keep the filter that knowing, like with MSNBC, it's going to have a left-leaning slant. Now, if you want to embrace that and go down that road, you're free to choose that. I would hope and pray you don't, because I think they're anti-Christian. Um, but at the same time, I want to say this very clearly. Marketplace of ideas, they should have the freedom to exist. If they can't make any money and they shut them down, that wouldn't hurt me. But should the government step in and force them to shut down? No. I believe and support wholeheartedly freedom of speech, even if it's ugly, even if it's misinformation. That's up to the marketplace of ideas for people to research and find the right information. All right. Okay, so let's review again. I read this passage last week. I think, didn't we read this? Yeah, you read it, right? Somebody read it. I'm going to read it this week. It's kind of long. Philippians 4, 4 through 9. But again, to me as a Christian, this is one of many verses and passages that I think about when I think about how to be a Christ follower in my current culture in which I find myself. So Paul, writing to the church in Philippi, says, "Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God." Now, this is a passage you'll hear a lot coming into the Thanksgiving season, because it's got all this stuff. Great, we should celebrate. Let's be thankful for everything God's done. All good stuff. Verse 7. "And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. What you have learned and received and have heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you." I believe this is one of those passages that clearly articulates, as Christ followers, what we should be focusing on. And this is, I'll come back to the whole media input, what you listen to, what you're watching. Can you say that's something that is true, honorable, just, pure, lovely, commendable, excellent, worthy of praise? Can I do that about everything I'm taking in? I think it's important not to condemn us to the point of, we slither away going, "Oh, I'm going to go burn all my albums and book." No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, this is a conviction for us to wrestle with. And the whole point of it is, we are only going to get better. Better is not the right word. We're only going to be stronger in our resistance to temptation and the enemy of God if we're focusing on whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is praiseworthy. So that when it's one thing to find, I find playing this game entertaining. But if it's like got demonology in it, or it's got really gory headshots, should I really be engaging in that? The little gaming experience I had, and I go back to the PC days of gaming. That's how old I am. Floppy disks, 5.25. You should look it up. It's quite entertaining. I really liked first-person shooter games. Really liked them. To the point where I'm like, and that was before the graphics are what they are today. I'm like, this is probably not the best. I mean, I don't want to go around shooting people, but it's still not probably the best use of my time, So instead, I just watch movies about people getting shot. See the hypocrisy? I justify on one hand going, "Oh, I really shouldn't be involved in that," but then I got excuses for why I will watch it. So that's a tension I have to deal with, and I either surrender to that conviction and make a change, or I continue to live with that tension and either ignore the voice of the Holy Spirit when it's convicting me about it, or come to a peace about what choices I'm making. You're going to make those decisions hundreds of times a day as you grow into adulthood. Welcome to adulthood. That's what we do. We think about that kind of stuff all the time. And sometimes you don't even think about it. Like I listen to iHeartRadio on my app, on my phone, in the car. 8 of the top 12 stations I listen to are 80s, because it was the best decade for music. Just saying. Um, and um, and there are times I'm driving down the road, I'm like, oh yeah, well, I sing along. I'm like, wait a minute. Oh yeah, that song's that probably should. No, that's not a good song to be singing to. But I was a teenager in the '80s. That was the music I grew up. Like you guys are growing up with music, and you're having to make choices about that. And honestly, you guys are having to deal with a lot more yucky stuff than we were. Ours were a little more, just slightly less obvious. There are still innuendo, references to um, ungodly behavior, but it was packaged differently than the way you guys are getting it. Nowadays, it's almost crude the way you guys are receiving that. But that's not an attack on you. That's the culture of the world we live in. Okay. All right. But I think Philippians reminds us of kind of the goal. Why we're doing this is to help us think. Okay. So let's talk about thinking again. Remember this graphic. Did I give you this size? I know you got it in one of the handouts. Yeah. So take one because you're going to need this for your presentation assignment. Because the fact that you guys react that way every time I say it gives me joy, right? Okay. So again, as you look at an event, this thing happened, okay? And it could be any number of things, okay? One of the things I find really interesting in our current dialogue, okay, so 2 weeks ago, the main topic was the government shutdown, right? We're into week 3, and it's barely getting any news. It's barely getting any news. It's incredible how it's being communicated right now. But the reality is that part of the government is shut down. So that is a real event. So then all these things are at place as we receive information about that real event. But this isn't just true for the editors who are deciding what information to put on their website or to put in their magazine or to put on YouTube. It's also what's our political view? What do we think about things? Who are we? All these things are in place. Like you read that article, just the headline, but then you moved on. Well, you selected not to spend much time. So this is happening for information that's distributed to us, and it's also ways that we process information. So that's how we deal with the event, the information coming to us. Last week we introduced the idea of critical thinking. And if you'll remember, I gave the definition of critical thinking as thinking in which you question, analyze, interpret, evaluate, and make a judgment about what you read, hear, say, or write. Again, back to your example. You saw that headline. It was interesting, intriguing, but not enough for you to dig further. You used moment of critical thinking for whatever was factoring into that. Maybe you just didn't have time, or you didn't care about their apparent angle you alluded to. You thought it would probably be a bias. And so that's critical thinking. The fact is, most of us engage in critical thinking without realizing we're engaged in critical thinking. So one of the things why I want you guys to do this presentation is because I want you to at least intentionally think through this at least once, so that you can at least have that familiarity. Whether you intentionally ask yourself all these questions in the future, that's not the point. It's not about memorizing the steps. It's not about, it's about just familiarizing yourself with what all goes into making decisions, okay? All right. This is crooked and I'm crooked enough. I don't need the camera to be crooked. Okay. All right. So you may remember last week we talked about the 7 checks of critical thinking. This was from a Christian perspective because check 1 was to check scripture. So again, we read about something, we hear about something. And we're like, well, what does scripture have to say about it? Okay. And then we check the challenge. What are they saying and what is our reaction to it? As an example, I don't know if you guys have continued to listen to or read the briefing with Albert Mohler, but he had an excellent segment on Mondays, the briefing of this week, and it was about Richard Dawkins. So Richard Dawkins is probably one of the most popular new atheists. He's a evolutionary biologist, very anti-God, attacking belief at all, and especially Christianity. And yet you would think he would be a hero of the left. He's pro evolution, he's anti Christianity, and yet he has written a chapter in this book, and in it, the New York Post pulled out a segment, and his article, the way it comes from this book, where's it at? But the name of the article is From Gravity to Gender, Scientific Truth Stands Above Human Feelings and Politics. And so he comes out against transgenderism from a biological perspective, saying, no, there's only male, female, there's only sperm and eggs. Those are biological facts. And how you feel about it and what the current politics of the day doesn't change that. And it's really interesting because you saw the same thing happen to J.K. Rowling, who wrote Harry Potter. She came out as pro-women, anti-men in women's sports, and a lot of people on the left demonized her. I mean, just ridiculed her. So much so that somebody recently, I can't remember who it was, an actress recently voiced something for a new Harry Potter or whatever. And she came out this week with an apology because she didn't realize there was an anti-J.K. Rowling movement that she offended by being a voice actor on this new whatever. And I'm like, seriously? So the point is, here you have Dawkins, who's an anti-Christian evolutionary biologist, who is now standing on the basis of biology, saying to the, if you will, the further left of his group, saying this whole transgender stuff is nonsense. It makes absolutely no sense. And so the reason I bring that up is because A, it's a good segment. I really suggest you read it. And B, again, what I really like about what Mueller does is he gives the link to the article. Here's where it is. The New York Post is horrible about ads. If you ever go there, there are pop-ups, there's videos, they're everywhere. But it's a really good read. And again, this is from an anti-Christian, okay? But it's from this book, The War on Science. Now, I don't know about you, but when I read that title, I immediately think about attacks of people on faith. Because oftentimes, and I've shared this with you guys before, as a pastor, I'm accused of being anti-science. And I'm not anti-science. I just put science in its proper perspective, okay? So this may be one of the, I'm looking forward to getting this book and reading it because I'm very intrigued by their take on it. But basically, it's 39 renowned scientists and scholars speak out about current threats to free speech, open inquiry, and scientific process. And I can promise you, there are going to be some hits on conservative, evangelical, male Christians like myself in this book. This is one of the examples I'm sharing with you about looking at other points of view, okay? But I can read this knowing that that is not going to cause me to abandon my core foundational beliefs of who I am as a follower of Christ. And that would be my caution to you guys at this phase in your life. You may not be at that place yet. So I would strongly encourage you about the sources you choose to read outside your current belief system. If you're a conservative Christian from a Christian home, and dialogue with your parents about what you're choosing to read to get their feedback and input on those sources as well. Because, and don't take this the wrong way, you're still susceptible. You're still open to persuasion, and you could very quickly find yourself way down a rabbit hole, leading you far away from your core foundational beliefs of who you are as a Christ follower, and not even knowing that you're going there and prepared to know how to respond to that, okay? All right, so we checked the challenge, we checked the source, who's it from, do we agree with them, do we even know anything about them? There are several journals and news sites out there like, who is this? You know, it's some obscure place, and it's literally you find out it's a funded group of a political wing just trying to persuade you by making it sound more authentic and real than it is. Check the definitions. You don't know what a word is. You don't know or you don't know how they define a word. You know, like I hate the terms biological woman. The term woman is biological. Sorry. But check the definitions. What do they mean by what they're saying? Is it in concurrence with what you understand it? Is it in concurrence with reality? Okay. Check for propaganda. How are they trying to spin it? What are they trying to make you focus on and overlook? Okay. And then check the interpretations, how they presented it to you, and the logic. Does it make sense? All right. So those are the steps. Now, here's the fun part. I found this recently on X, and X. If you like graphics like me, there's a ton of graphic stuff out there you can find. So I say this saying I don't know this person. I don't endorse anything else that he's done. I don't even like everything he's done with this, but I think it's a helpful visual of how to think through critical thinking. Now he has 5 steps in his cycle of critical thinking that are not like the 7 checklist I gave you. But what I really like about this graphic is he gives you questions to think through. Okay. So look under the evidence stage. You're going to gather evidence. Verify before you trust, gather facts and sources, check dates and numbers. Questions. Where did this data come from? Who paid for this study? How many people were asked? When was this data collected? Can I find this elsewhere? So going back to the Richard Dawkins transgender thing, this is newly released research this week, which is why I think Mueller talked about it. There has been, so there's a survey that is done with college-age young adults. And in 2020, the percentage of that group, that age group that was asked this in this survey, like 6 point some odd percent identified as no gender. They weren't going to identify as male or female. And so that was like the first real big spike in the whole transgender wave. Okay. Well, that same researcher has released research just last week saying, oh, it's dropped in half. So half the respondents, percentage wise, that were identifying as no gender are now identifying as male or female. The point is, and that, I don't know if it's Dawkins who used this term or if it was that author of that, I think it was the author of the research, said fashion has changed. And by saying that, he points out the fact that this whole transgender thing, non-fluid, non-binary stuff, is as much a social contagion as it is any true gender identifying reality. And what's important to say in context of all that is this is not a Christian, he's not a right-wing political person trying to make a point, push. No, this is a guy who just does data research and presents it. Okay. And so the point is, when you ask the question, how many people were asked? You can look at his data. You can see who he asked, where he was drawing the information from, young adult, college age people, and so you can trust his data, because of course it's always going to have a little bit of bias, but it is at least neutral, if not left leaning resource that indicates that the whole transgender thing was largely socially driven and has dropped precipitously over the last 5 years. So that's gather evidence. Second stage, assumption stages. These are questions we're asking about, what am I assuming is true? What would this work everywhere? What if I'm wrong? Is this always true? What rule am I following? This is the irony in the Queers for Palestine. This was a group that were out with the protesters. They were pro-Hamas and saying Hamas, Palestine should be right to have their own country, and we're homosexuals, we're LGBTQ people, and we are for Palestine. The fact is, if they were in Palestine, they would be killed for their very life choices to be LGBTQ. So when you ask the question, would this work everywhere? Nope. Wouldn't work there. Is this always true? No, it won't be true there. It's not true in a lot of the Middle Eastern countries. Okay. So you got to challenge your own assumptions. Then you go to the third stage, third cycle, perspective. See all sides of the issue. Get out of your bubble. Ask different people. Ask who disagrees with this. How do others see it? Who wins and who loses? What would customers say? And who did we ask? Um, and again, this is the area I would encourage you to be cautious at your age of exploring alternative viewpoints, and make sure your parents are involved in your exploratory phase so that they know where you're getting your information. Okay. Then generate alternatives. Think outside the box, consider other options, mix various ideas together. This is especially important when you're looking at biblical truth, because like when you say that life is life and life begins at conception, so therefore I'm anti-abortion, which I am. It's if you work through the alternative options, well, maybe it is just a clump of cells. Well, it's a clump of cells with a destination. Unless you interrupt that destination, it's going to its conclusion, which is a fully formed human being living outside the womb of the mother. It's got its own DNA. It's got a heart. It's all these things. So when you look at all the information, it doesn't add up. Scientifically, you cannot make the case that it is not a human being destined for external life outside the womb of the mother unless it is interrupted. So therefore, I don't have an alternative to it. I can't say there's any exception for no abortion because of the human life that's involved. I know there's 2 human lives involved, but the baby human life is the one who's going to face the death penalty. Okay, and then map implications. Think ahead, find ripple effects, anticipate future problems. What happens next? Who else gets affected? What problems might this create? How does this spread? What comes after that? So go back to the abortion debate. So oftentimes when you have abortion conversations nowadays, people say, well, Christians, you're just pro-birth. You're not pro-life. You need to adopt. You need to be supporting pregnancy resource centers. You need to be supporting women who choose to keep babies. And we scream from the rooftops. I could give you a list of 20 people that will take a baby today if you don't want it. Just give us the baby. Let the baby have life. And I always like to do this. I'm like, oh, by the way, I have adopted an orphan. Have you? Then shut up. And I don't do that often because that's kind of snide. But the fact is, some of us are doing that, and many of us are doing that. And so, so what comes next? Now, does that take away from the fact that this woman who's carrying this baby has to carry it for 9 months? No, that's a reality. That's an implication on her and her life for the next 9 months. So then what can we do to help her in these next 9 months? How can we help her meet medical bills, pay the rent, just get counseling to come to terms with, I didn't really want this baby. And now, but even to wrestle through that, because there have been women who've been, I'll take the baby to term and then I'll give it up for adoption. And the moment they see the child, they're like, that's it, I'm keeping it, but the bottom line is, we're not going to ignore the fact that there are real implications for this woman to carry this child to term. But we want to offer a viable alternative. Okay, so all these things I want you guys to use as you work on your fun next assignment. PowerPoint presentation of an article or source of choice. So it could be a news blurb that like a news report that you see on TV or an article. Use critical thinking questions to analyze the article or source. These, as well as the 7 checklists from last week. Okay. Present observations of bias, the way the information is presented, and your